inner city. I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I know these are very confusing and fast-moving times, so we're trying to get you as much information and as much local information as we possibly can. The first thing I want to do is thank our partners for joining us today. It has been an incredibly busy week for everybody. I want to thank BECMA, the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, Berkshire Bank, the City of Boston, and CommonWealth Kitchen for joining us and spending some time with us sharing what they know of the situation today. I also want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. I want to thank all the small business owners who are making this process, this transition and this battling this time. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Grossman, CEO of the Initiative for a Competitive Inner City, to bid you welcome on our behalf.
I'm just going to take a couple of minutes because we've got an amazing group of colleagues and panelists here who have a lot of really important information to transmit. I want to thank all of them. I particularly want to thank the City of Boston, Marty Walsh, the Mayor of Boston, and his team for the announcement of the $2 million grant program for small businesses. And I know there'll be plenty of discussion about that a little bit later from Natalia, who represents the City of Boston in her role as head of small business. I just wanted to make one important point about the CARES Act and about the money that is going to be disseminated starting today or early next week. And our research director, Howard Weil, published a policy brief, which we put up this afternoon on our website, it's ICIC.org. If you click on the homepage, the Small Business Resource Center, you'll find the policy brief. And in that policy brief, Howard makes a very important point. And that is that as this money begins to flow from banks who have the authority to make small business loans through the SBA, that fairness, equity, and inclusion have got to be principal ingredients and fundamental principles. The businesses that we talk to and that we represent are overwhelmingly minority-owned, immigrant-owned, women-owned, and they desperately need these forgivable loans. And I hope our banks in Boston and all over Massachusetts make sure that they leave none of our small businesses in our under-resourced communities, often referred to as inner cities, but under-resourced communities, that they leave them out and behind. This is about surviving, and without these loans, these businesses will fail, will not survive. It would be economically and morally wrong for that not to be the case. So with the voice that every one of us has, let the bankers know, let the public policy makers know that this money needs to flow in a fair and equitable way. No one should be left behind. Oftentimes, people don't feel that they've got the relationships with the banks or with the lawyers or with accountants, and they feel that they're going to be on an unlevel playing field. This is about leveling the playing field, about fairness and equity in every aspect of this program. So just wanted to share that point with you. You can read more about it on our Small Business Resource Center. With that, let me thank everyone for participating, most notably the small business owners, and turn it back to my colleague, Diego Portillo-Mazal.
Thank you, Steve. Steve referenced our Small Business Resource Center. Once again, we've been compiling a number of resources that we've received that are both national, they're local, they're geographic, they're across industry. So please take some time and go visit our resource center, either at ICIC.org or through this bit.ly/SBRC_ICIC. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Natalia Utrube, Director of Small Business and Executive Director of Imagine Boston 2030 with the City of Boston. Natalia, over to you.
Thank you, first and foremost, for having us on this incredible panel. We have been working 24 hours a day, is what it feels like, over the last 3 weeks. I don't even know how long it's been at this point, to make sure that every small business in the City of Boston has the support and the resources that they need. Every day is different, every day is changing, and we're here. We're excited to be announcing not just the $2 million fund that the mayor announced yesterday, but also talking about other resources that we've put together over the course of this time to support small businesses. Definitely happy to answer any questions. I do think that this is an important platform for people to get their questions answered. Another big thing that we've been doing over the course of this time is trying to help people navigate the existing systems. So obviously how they can access resources from the state, from the federal government, from our community partners, as well as other resources that exist. And so I'm happy to chat a little bit about that. But I'm just excited to be here and to see all of my colleagues here who fight every day for small businesses represented here on this panel. So thank you. Diego, do you want me to talk about specifics around each of these programs? Do you want me to list them? What's the best way for me to get them across?
Sure. Why don't you give us a little bit of a briefing on some of them, if you can?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the biggest elephant in the room. So we announced yesterday the Small Business Relief Fund from the city of Boston. Applications will open on Monday for that. So anyone that's interested can go to boston.gov/business relief. This fund is really intended to help small businesses. We're limiting it to businesses with up to 35 employees, less than 1.5 million in revenue, obviously based in the city of Boston. We're hoping that this isn't the end of the fund at the 2 million. We're hoping that we continue to find resources to add to it. This fund will go as long as the money is available, and will continue to support small businesses throughout that process. We are going to be translating all of the information so that people, our business owners, we know we have a majority, not a majority, but we have a ton of business owners that are immigrants that maybe don't have as easily accessible English language access. And so we are going to be translating all of that information so that everyone has the opportunity to access. If folks don't have computers or need technology access, or just need help filling out the application, we will have a hotline where folks can call, and we'll help people go through the entire application from start to finish with our team. So this fund is an incredible feat. We're really excited and thankful for our partners at the federal government. This is mostly being funded currently through our community development block grants. So I want to give a shout out to Sheila Dillon from D&D, as well as my chief, John Barrows, who have been working tirelessly to make this work. So that's the fund. Like I said, it starts on Monday, and we're hoping to continue it as long as we possibly can. And we're going to continue to look for resources to pass along to business owners. So these will be small grants, so they will not need to be paid back. These will be in the form of $2,500, $5,000, or $10,000 grants. I also want to talk about basically just the confusion that exists right now with the CARES Act. I know how difficult it is to navigate that system. And so we've created a document called the Financial Relief Handbook. So we're continuously updating this document with new resources. And what it entails is essentially local, state, federal, and private partnerships that exist out there that are offering resources to small businesses. So this is available on our website. I'm happy to let folks know how to get there. But that's one of the most recent tools that we've put out. And this document will really help people navigate what's out there, as well as what are the requirements for application, the description, any limitations that exist. So we have everything from the CARES Act in there to, small local funds that are producing, little grants that will support small businesses. We've also, at the very beginning of this this pandemic, we put out a bunch of resources for restaurants and food businesses in particular, considering there was a lot of guidance set up for them. So we created two very important platforms that are still on our website today. One is called Support Boston Restaurants. And that platform allows folks to find out who's open. So any restaurant in the city of Boston that's open, and actually we extended that out to our partners in Cambridge, Needham, Newton, and I believe there's one more city on there, and I'm sorry for forgetting which city it is. But we have restaurants all over the greater Boston area listed on this platform. So you know who is doing delivery, who's doing takeout, who's selling gift cards, who is on what platforms. It's a great resource for our residents as well as the businesses, because that does provide a little bit of extra kind of visibility. We also provided a similar platform called Support Boston Open Businesses. And this platform exists for essential businesses that are open. So very similar to the first platform that I talked about, but really as a way of supporting essential businesses. We've also created an FAQ document. So if any small business in the city of Boston has questions about what's going on, this FAQ document is very in-depth. It covers information locally at the city of Boston level, but also all the way up to the state and the federal government. So I recommend people visit the Boston Economic Development Response Form on our website, because there's a ton of information, and you can just go to boston.gov/small-business and click on the COVID-19 response, and it'll take you to a page that is full of really great resources that I urge everybody to look through. Spend some time reading what's going on, and you'll get a really good sense of what the city is doing, and also how we're supporting businesses right now.
Natalia, we're going to save most of the questions for the end, but the one thing, you mentioned restaurants, but the other big concern is obviously construction businesses.
Of course.
We are going into, hopefully at some point, spring, and there is a lot of questions about moratoriums on construction and what that's going to mean and what the city may be doing towards helping or construction businesses. Can you address that for a moment?
Yeah, so I think our biggest concern right now is safety and making sure people are protected and in safe environments. So the city of Boston has put very clear guidelines around construction, and there's a whole page on our website that also showcases what those guidelines are. I am not an expert on construction, so I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what it means, but essentially if the construction that's being done is not emergency or COVID related, it is on pause. I know the governor and the mayor are working really hard to move past this to be able to get folks working again. But as of right now, I urge everybody to just be patient. We are working as fast as we can to move everything back, to get everything back to normal, but it does require a little bit of time before we can do that.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to Shagun Idowu from the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, which operates as the chamber for Black-owned businesses across the state. I've heard Shagun mention, and something that we all know, Steve talked about DEI and the strong response that we feel needs to be made for minority-owned businesses and businesses in underserved communities. I think I heard Shagun mention that when the American economy catches a cold, Black America catches pneumonia. So just going to give the platform to Shagun to address some of the issues that we're seeing across the state with minority-owned businesses. Shagun.
Thank you very much, Diego. I appreciate that introduction. You stole all my good lines, so I appreciate it. And Steve and Marini, appreciate your leadership of ICIC, and I'm grateful to be serving on this panel with all of this august body, with Natalia and Robin Jen and Roz. So yes, my name is Shagun. I have the privilege of serving as the executive director of BECMA. We serve about 300 business members, Black-owned business members across the state of Massachusetts. And I'll just say briefly some of the ways that we've been addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and trying to best serve our members. To your point, Diego, about DEI and making sure that we're centering Black and Brown communities in this crisis, you were correct to lift up that quote about Black America catching pneumonia. For us, equity is very important. I appreciate Steve mentioning that at the top of this. It needs to be the steel frame with which all of our responses operate under, in our opinion. We believe that a lot of the response is disproving the notion that a rising tide lifts all boats. We can already see in some of the questions in the chat of how communities of color are already being pushed out of the opportunity to get this relief because certain banks are not, if they weren't doing business with you before, they're not going to help you through this process. I know we'll get to that later on. But very quickly, the ways that we have been addressing coronavirus, the very first thing we did before the federal government announced anything, before the state really began to make sure that we were protecting all of our residents, was we were just putting the resources that were available by the CDC, as well as early resources from different corporations across the country on our website. We get pretty high traffic from our membership who are checking in pretty regularly to see all the opportunities out there. So we were sure to put those resources on our website. Second thing we did very, very quickly was to conduct an impact survey of our members to get an understanding of two things. First, how our members were already feeling the impact of COVID-19, but also how they were preparing for the future, knowing that this was going to be a long haul for all of us. And so what that survey revealed is nothing that shocks any of us, but should concern us. That 90% of them at that time, before there was any stay-at-home advisory, before this was in the media every single day at every single hour, 90% of our businesses were already experiencing a negative financial impact as a result of the concern over coronavirus. 60% of our members said that they either don't have any reserves at all to last through this pandemic, or only had enough to last up until 90 days, and they would have to close indefinitely. Important to note that we sent this survey out about a month ago now, and so I'm sure that the landscape has changed very much so for our business members. And then, of course, what we have been seeing in terms of the numbers for unemployment, over half of those that responded employ more than 2 people. I think the numbers were at least full-time. Those that responded employed at least 500 full-time employees. And almost half of them said that they would have to lay off their staff in order for the business to survive. So because of that survey, we were able to work with partners like the MA LGBT Chamber and Berkshire Bank, which I'm happy is represented today, to develop a couple of products for our members to ensure that marginalized communities had access to relief in order to kind of stave off the huge negative impact that we're going to continue to experience. And I know that an announcement is coming out next week, but this was also announced a few weeks ago that Berkshire took a leadership role. They stepped out first and they said, we are setting aside $3.5 million in order to serve communities of color and the LGBT community. And $3 million of that is going to be in the form of community underwritten loans for our members, as well as the ability for the bank to work with members to prepare for the opportunities at the SBA. And I'll leave the rest of the Berkshire stuff to Rob because I don't want to take anything from you. But moving on, we're also part of a coalition. I'm happy to see that Jen Fagel is on the call, working with CommonWealth Kitchen, the Foundation for Business Equity, the Boston Ujima Project. I know Amplify Latinx is represented on the call today. Working with all of these groups to develop specific products that are going to serve our communities. And so through the Foundation for Business Equity and the Boston Foundation, they have developed a product to in the form of forgivable loans for Black and Brown businesses across the Commonwealth. And I know more information on that is going to be released very shortly as well. I would say the final two pieces are just the advocacy work that we've been doing. Again, one of our key leaders is on the phone or on the call, is going to speak a little bit later, Jen Fagel, who's been leading the charge. I want to congratulate or acknowledge the efforts of the city, particularly the mayor, Chief Barros, Natalia, and the whole economic development team for developing these grants, but also want to shout out Jen and her doggedness in making sure that all of our cities and towns across the Commonwealth are serving marginalized communities. And so those efforts are happening on the city level, but also happening at the State House on a continual basis to ensure that our communities are not left out in the cold in the recovery process. And then the final piece is that we've developed a new series called On the Mark. And this is a virtual series that's going to allow us to connect our members with policymakers and doers who will give a broad-based understanding of the policies and programs that they have developed, but also give an opportunity to our members to ask them specific questions on how their business can take advantage of those policies or programs. So we're fortunate to have Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley be our first guest yesterday morning. And she spoke about the CARES Act and different ways that folks can participate and take advantage of those programs from the SBA. And there, back to this piece, and I'll end here on why equity is important. One of the statements she made was that the virus doesn't discriminate by race, gender, or immigrant status. Our relief efforts must focus on all communities. And so, from Beckman's perspective, we're looking forward to working with all of the members represented on this call, but also those who are participating as attendees to ensure that equity is the main focus in all of our efforts to ensure that all of our communities come out of this stronger than when we entered this pandemic.
Thanks, Shagun. I know Natalia mentioned that she had forgotten a point, so I'm going to go back to Natalia for a moment before we go to Jen. Natalia.
Thank you, Diego. I'm so sorry. One of the first and most important things that we've done since this whole thing started was we created a survey. So we've been doing a series of surveys over the course of time since early March. And this survey is really allowing us to understand firsthand what's happening to individual businesses in the city of Boston. We've done 3, we're on our 3rd one. If folks on the call are interested in sharing their story with us, this data is really helping and driving basically all of our advocacy, both to the state, to the federal government, and the mayor is using this data to really inform the public about what's going on. So I do urge folks on the call to make sure that they're filling out this survey. It's really helpful to us. We had 1,100 participants in the first survey and over 1,500 in the second one. So we just put out the last one, the 3rd survey yesterday. April 1st, and we'll continue it until about April 8th, and then we'll put out the next survey. So I urge folks to just continue to share their stories with us. It's very helpful for our data and also just to be able to advocate. Thank you so much, Diego.
Thank you. And in some ways, this panel feels a little bit like a meeting of friends because we are very lucky in Boston to have the leadership of so many of these organizations work together so closely. Shagun mentioned the LGBTQ Chamber. He mentioned Amplify Latinx, and he mentioned, obviously, our next speaker, CommonWealth Kitchen, which much beyond being an incubator for food-based businesses has been a voice not just for the food-based businesses and that industry, but for all small businesses and all the underserved communities across the state of Massachusetts. So Jen, take it away.
My goodness, can everybody see that I'm blushing? That's very kind of all of you. Several people have said to me, thank you for your leadership on this call and in other places. And And all I keep saying is, isn't this why we do what we do? Is to be able to be in a place where we can actually affect change, make things better, work with the people that we love and respect to actually like move the needle. And so as much as painful and frustrating and as hard and as all of this and stressful as all of this is, I am incredibly hopeful and humbled by the group of people that are coming together and how folks are coming together. And so that's exciting to see, having spent a long time with a big mouth trying to fight my way to make good things happen. So the CommonWealth Kitchen team, we have been on the front lines of this really from the beginning, because we work with a lot of food businesses that were immediately seeing the impact back when the catering stopped, when the farmers markets closed, when the food trucks, when all the office buildings closed. And so the food trucks started to slow down. And it really hit us when the colleges closed, because a lot of our companies and ourselves were actually selling into the college market. And so we, like the 50 plus businesses we work with, in the course of about 48 hours, saw half of our budget go out the window. So that's really scary. And so I feel some of what the pain and angst that our business owners feel. It's not the same, because I run a nonprofit and my job is to be a professional beggar. And so that's what I do. And so we're able to kind of keep things going. But honestly, to see firsthand what probably most of you on the phone are feeling or seeing yourselves or in the people you work with, and the pain, and in some cases the desperation and the loss of the dream and the vision and the hope from so many people who these small businesses are their lives, is really, it's devastating, it's moving, and it's why we've been trying to work really hard across multiple fronts to try to make things happen. So what does that look like? So for our organization, we literally closed our shared kitchen 2+ weeks ago, because we wanted to figure out what does a new normal look like, so that we can make sure people are safe when they come back into our kitchens, that we're doing things like taking temperatures and making sure that people are thinking about their families before they come in. And so really just trying to get our heads around how on earth you run a shared kitchen in today's environment. So we actually are still closed. We will likely not open for another week while we set that up. What we've been doing with all of our business owners and those that work in our kitchen, but also a broader network of food businesses, is doing a series of webinars. And those who want to participate in these webinars going forward, we can put the info, but Roz at CommonWealth Kitchen, ROZ at CommonWealthKitchen.org. And we can get you connected into the listservs that we're doing to try to provide advice and support to food companies, as well as a series of webinars. So that's been everything from HR to, we're doing one next week on unemployment. So how to apply for unemployment, now that we know that sadly practically everybody on this call can actually now apply for and be qualified for unemployment. And we were, I don't know if I'm embarrassed or pleased that the fact that the unemployment rate, even for some of our own staff, means that they will be paid more on unemployment than they get paid by getting the city's living wage. So that's a humbling thing as we think about what comes next and how do we create the right safety nets for people going forward. But we are really trying to figure out the fastest way to get money into people's pockets now, because we know a lot of you business owners this came as a surprise. As Shagun said, nobody has safety nets. So how do we make sure as quickly as we can there's cash coming in? And so I'm thrilled that the city of Boston have put out this grant program. We've been pushing hard on everybody. Today is the day. If you have not tried to get the LISC Verizon 10,000 grant, there's an online form to apply for that grant. The federal emergency, the EIDL, they're now calling it, the EIDL has those $10,000 advance grants. So we are trying to push everybody really hard that the best thing you can do right now is to put your mask on, get some money in your bank account, and do what we are doing, which is to take a rest, make sure your family is well as you then plan for what comes next. For our organization, partly what comes next is starting to move to respond to the emergency food need. So anybody who's been following along has seen that there are a lot of people in need of something to eat. So everything from the restaurant workers that have been laid off, to the hospital workers that are working full time, to the families that are home that rely on BPS for meals for their kids, but that's breakfast and lunch only. They're not getting dinner. It's challenging to get out. And so we are starting next week, going to start moving into providing emergency food to families. And we're working with Dimmick Community Health Center. We're working with Friends of the Children Boston. So we'll be probably doing 7,000 or 8,000 meals a week for them. Still looking for money. We'll figure that out. But more important is that people get taken care of, and then continuing to figure that work out. And so anybody on this call that is involved in the food industry, restaurants and others who want to try to get involved in some of this emergency food work, what we know is over the next 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to get a lot worse. And so we are trying to make sure we are doing what we can to help deploy resources where they need to be, where they need to go, but in a safe way. So for example, we are working with the Restaurant Workers Relief Fund that some of you have seen that Ming Tsai from Blue Ginger and others are doing. And we literally have one of our food trucks, Jamaica Me Hungry, who was just driving his truck around with fully prepared meals in Chelsea and in Boston and handing out food to restaurant workers who have been laid off. So again, lots of incredible things that we're seeing of people wanting to rally and step up. We are doing the best we can to try to support those efforts and also try to organize those efforts, because we know that this is a time when things can get really disorganized. And while we're doing that, we're very involved at the state level of trying to understand all the emergency rescue, all the emergency food and where it's going to go and how do we support. So that's kind of our, we're playing in a lot of lanes right now. And as we do that, really trying to think through how do we support the small businesses in our city, the small businesses we work with. How do we help how do we help get more culturally relevant food out into the communities? One of the things we've heard from the emergency food piece is that the folks doing that work are not necessarily doing a lot of, Latino food and Haitian food and, others. And so can we help with that? So that's a place where we hope to continue to support in this effort. So I'll leave it there. I'm sure people have questions. And I saw a question about support for nonprofits. And so I'm happy later to tell you what we're doing with PPP and other things and advise as much as I can. So thanks.
Great. Jen, you laid it up perfectly for the next topic, which is obviously the biggest question that everybody has is the PPP. Everybody's been hearing, obviously, that today is the day when applications start. Some banks obviously have been ahead of others. Some lenders are still getting last minute information. Not all the information is there. I think we've heard this described as trying to build a plane while we're flying at 10,000 feet. So to give us a little bit of clarity on where we are today and what we expect to see in the next few days, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Torres from Berkshire Bank. Rob, go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Rob Torres, and I am a relationship manager for Berkshire Bank. For those that don't know who Berkshire Bank is, we are a community-based bank here based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and our goal is to be a 21st century community bank, working with our Black and Brown businesses, our LGBTQ community, the underserved and the underbanked. So being able to be on this panel with Jen Shagun, Natalia Raz, it's an honor to be with this group because these are the pioneers. These are the folks that have been in the trenches for many, many years before I was. So I want to thank you guys for that. And then Steve and Diego, thank you for your leadership in this. So yes, the $1 trillion question is the good old fashioned PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. As Diego said, today was day one, or is day one of it. So yes, so just a little background. This is an ever-moving process that is going on, and I always like to say we are at the mercy of our friends at the Treasury and the SBA with a lot of this. You're hearing many things right now regarding accessibility to the application. Is your local bank or your bigger bank actually accepting the application? And that is a very loaded question right now because of the fact of all the banks were given the guidelines late last night from the SBA of how to process, how to get this into the system and be able to try to operate for day one. Some very small community banks have already started from everything, some I'm reading. very few on the local side, more on the national side. And then the larger banks and the community regional banks, is like Berkshire would be, we've decided to take a step back and review the guidelines, make sure the process is efficient and transparent so that we can start being able to take applications, hopefully on Monday. Monday is the goal for us to be able to load all the applications that we are getting ready to move on. But as I said, this is a ever-changing world. I'll give an example. There's been 3 different versions of the application in the last 24 to 48 hours. So as you see, it's ever fluid, ever moving. There is $350 billion. And one of the biggest things is everyone's worried about the money running out. You got to think $350 billion, and that is spread across 1,800 community banks, I should say banks across the nation that are SBA, that can actually lend to the SBA, through the SBA, I'm sorry. So the money is going to be there. So I know there's that overarching fear of the money is going to run out. You know, we're going to do our best as Berkshire Bank to make sure that all our customers and our partners in the nonprofits, our Black and Brown owned businesses, are able to get access to that capital and be able to move that way. So just a few different things right now that we're doing, and Shagun really mentioned it real quick before I continue on to the PPP, is we are working on our community underwritten loans, working through BECMA and the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce to be able to provide capital to our Black and Brown and LGBTQ partners in the community of Boston. So we're very proud to be working with BECMA, Shagun, and Grace Moreno from the LGBTQ Chamber on that. And as Shagun said, we should be seeing that roll into hopefully Monday, early next week, to be able to start divvying up that $3.5 million. So back to the PPP. So, you know, everyone's asking, you know, where can you apply? Like I said, you can apply obviously at any of your local banks, any bank that is an SBA preferred lender or a lender that can do that. And then who can apply? So it's all businesses, including nonprofits, veterans organizations, tribal businesses, sole props, and self-employed individuals who have 500 or more, 500 or fewer employees, I'm sorry. There are industries, and this doesn't apply to, I'm sure the majority of the folks on this phone, but if you are over 500, there are certain standards, but I'm sticking to the under 500 crew here. You know, what do you need to apply? It's right now, that has been the very big $1 million question, I'll say, because the only guarantee right now is the application, in which is provided by the SBA that was just updated. As far as documentation, we are still not 100% sure. Right now, this loan is based off of payroll and being able to support payroll for 8 weeks. So what we're telling our customers and our partners is, have your 2019 monthly average payrolls, your 941s, your payroll journals, to be able to calculate that actual amount that you could qualify for. And as you've heard, you can qualify for 2.5 times the amount of your average monthly payroll. So when I say some of the banks are doing this early right now, the big thing is the fact of being able to have the complete notice of the documentation that we need, per se. So right now, that's the loaded question, but right now I've been telling my customers and partners, like I said, to please make sure you have your payroll documentation in hand. This is supposed to be a streamlined process at the end of the day. You know, we want to be able to take these applications, whether it's Berkshire Bank or one of our other local banks, or who you bank with, to be able to get the application in the system, get you approved and funded, and be able to get your business back to where you need to be, and be able to take care of your employees and take care of your family and friends. So yeah, so essentially, you know, right now the cost you can be using for payroll, so that extra, they say 250%, 2.5 times the amount of your average payroll, can also be used for interest on mortgage obligations, rent, and then utilities as well. So obviously you want to be able to keep all aspects of the business running to the best of your ability. And then another big question that has come up a lot is what counts as payroll cost. So that does count as obviously salary, wages, and commissions. And keep in mind, it's capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. So if you have an employee that makes $110,000, they're capped at that $100,000 mark. Also including in the payroll costs are employee benefits, which include the cost for vacation, parental, family, medical, and sick leave, state and local taxes assessed on the compensation. And then for a sole proprietor or an independent contractor, it's wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment, again, capped at that $100,000. So the big thing with this loan, obviously, is the forgiveness piece of it, and being able to have the ability to have some or a portion of this loan to be forgiven. The guidelines have not really been all that drawn out. We haven't gotten that sliding scale, but obviously, using the majority of it for the payroll is going to get the most forgiven, and then the rest through the interest on the mortgage, the rent, the utilities, etc. They haven't really gone that far to the forgiveness piece of what we're looking for, but we will be exploring that, obviously, once we get everything up and running, once the monies are lent out and distributed out to those. So basically, some people are asking, after the 8 weeks, how do I start requesting the forgiveness? You would work with your local lender to submit that request. And the one piece of advice I have for everyone on this line right now is two big things. Number one, make sure you have a running track of everything you are using these funds for. The more you can provide, the better. The paper trail is key to making sure that you're able to have this majority or all of this loan forgiven. And then also, what we're suggesting is if you are able to have an additional account set up for your small business with your institution, have that set up where the funds go right into there, because that's a great accounting and running tally of everything you're using. So it's not getting mixed up with other business things that you're trying to do, whether it be payroll or whether it be operating. Having that on its own will make it very easy and streamlined for you to be able to start using those funds and be able to track those funds. The great thing about this is obviously this is unsecured. We're not requiring any collateral. And right now the rate, and I say right now because the rate has changed in three times. It was originally a rate of 4% with a loan term of 5 years. Then they went to 0.5% for 2 years. And then yesterday they went and changed it to 1% in a term of 2 years. So to confirm, as of today, the rate of this is 1% with a 2-year term. And again, I always say this is a moving number and this could change in 24 hours. I hope not, but I always have to be transparent as we talk about that. And again, like I said, there is no collateral to pledge, nor is there are no personal guarantees. So that all being said, that is I call the around the world in 30 minutes type of phrase around the PPP program. And I'll turn it back to Diego. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions through the audience as we move on. Thank you, Diego.
Thanks, Rob. And Rob, you mentioned that some banks have been able to move faster than others. We just heard from Century Bank that they're already taken and have managed to do their first approvals today, and will be entering close to 200 applications this weekend. But I think the main part of this is obviously what you said, is approach the bank that you do business with first. And a lot of the small businesses and the self-employed people in our community keep wondering, what exactly does a banking relationship entail, and how do I approach and who do I approach? You mentioned there's 1,800 lenders. Who am I supposed to be talking to first?
Yeah, so you should start talking to the bank in which you have your relationship with. That whether it be a small business relationship or a consumer relationship. I do know that each bank is able to distinguish how they are determining that title of relationship. But it's always good to be able to go to your local bank, your local branch, or calling someone that the local representative that you do work with, to be able to start finding out more facts around that, because that will be the most streamlined way to be able to start working on gathering the paperwork as well as the documentation. There is a bank out there that actually is not supporting their small businesses, I've been told, and if you didn't have a lending relationship or a business credit card with them, they would not be giving you any type of relationship to be able to work with the PPP. So we myself, Malia Lazu, for those that don't know, she's our Chief Brand and Culture Officer and our Regional President for Eastern Massachusetts. We've been working on ways to see how we can support some of those folks that may not necessarily have deposit relationships with us now. We are in the realms of trying to review that as we go. But right now we are looking to work with our folks that are existing customers and members of either Revex Labs, which is our co-working space in Roxbury, or existing Berkshire Bank customers, but we are looking to explore other options as we move through this process. But the best way to is start working with your local bank and your local branch manager, relationship manager, whoever you have a relationship with, to be able to see if you can start that process going.
This is more of a general question, and Jen, I will come back to you specifically on how nonprofits address this. But I think we've heard from a number of businesses saying, I'm okay up until today. But if this lasts X number of weeks more, I will have to lay off people, I will have trouble, I will have staff issues. When do I apply is sort of the big question. And I think that goes to both Natalia and Rob. Natalia, your thoughts first.
Yeah, so I think where we are coming from the city of Boston is we're telling people apply to everything as often as you possibly can. So our financial resources handbook, I think, is a great tool because it allows you to look at all the resources that are out there. None of us know how long this is going to last. None of us know, what new funds might come out of this later. So, we're letting people know, just, if anyone wants to stay on our, get on our email list, we are sending these opportunities out as often as we can. We're connecting with folks every single Tuesday via conference calls, 3 p.m. on Tuesdays. So, our recommendation is continue to apply to everything that you possibly can. Reach out to your community partners, reach out to your bank, reach out to your landlords, reach out to your, support system, and continue to outreach and self-advocate, because I think a lot of this will be around advocacy and making sure that the partners, especially everyone on this panel, we're all here to support you. Reach out to us, let us know what you need and how it's happening over time.
Rob, any additional thoughts?
Natalia said it best. Apply to everything that you're able to. There are multiple programs. There are multiple grant programs. Obviously, bank programs through your local bank, or if you're a customer of Berkshire Bank. But being able to have all those ability to have those applications in, applying, and getting those funds in. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that our businesses are becoming cash rich right now to be able to take care of themselves, their families, and their employees. So to have all those, to be able to have all those different avenues to go to, I say absolutely apply everywhere, especially the ones, the EIDL, the Emergency Disaster Relief, that $10,000 advance. Those are those are the quick hits. Granted, I've been told they have been slowing down a little bit, but still, don't let that frustrate you. Just get out there and start applying.
I'm going to ask the pointed question first and then go to the more general question. The pointed question is, in these grants and loans that are currently available, are nonprofits considered small businesses? Do they get to apply for the funds that are currently being released in the array of grants and loans that we just talked about?
Yes, the short answer is yes.
Great. And then I think there's a more general question around nonprofits. One is what to do sort of longer term. And Jen, you mentioned a little bit of the re-envisioning and the work that you guys are doing in supporting nonprofits. There's also a question of, does this emergency relief cause a drying of general funding for nonprofits later in the year? Are we moving all funds to COVID-19 response? Therefore, education funding, for small business owners 6 months from now may dry up. And so Jen, your thoughts, and then we'll go to Shagun.
Sorry. So I think, I mean, Natalia said this earlier, this is completely unprecedented territory. I don't think anybody really knows what this is going to look like in 3 months or 6 months or a year. I put into the chat box that we've already been talking with Congressman Presley's office, but also folks at the federal level around another stimulus that needs to come out, because we all know that our small business community that we're talking about here is largely not going to be helped by the programs that are out right now. So as much as I just want to disagree a little bit, Rob, with what you said about apply for everything, which is to say that for an awful lot of the small businesses we work with, they don't qualify either because either because they can't take on a loan, they don't know if they're going to be in business in 6 months or 3 months. They in some cases there are still some credit and personal guarantee requirements. So I think there's still some challenges that are out there. Grant money, yes. EIDL, yes, if you can get it, the $10,000 advance. Anybody who has a business, whether that be a for-profit or a nonprofit, that believes that by June 30th, more or less, you will be back up in business something close to what you looked like back in February, which is still a guess, then yes, apply for the PPP. We have applied for the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, and like everybody else, we're in line. I don't know if and when we'll get it. I think the challenge right now is that, and you heard Rob say this, is that even now that the legislation is out, they are still changing the terms and still changing the rules. And those who want to apply for unemployment, you still can't even apply in Massachusetts as a sole proprietor. So there's a lot of clunky things in this system. I think those of us in the nonprofit sector have to understand, just like our small businesses, our models are going to look different for a lot of us. For our organization, I do not expect that we will go back to what we were doing in January in the next 12 to 18 months. I just don't see it. I think we are going to be in crisis mode for a very long time, because that's what we need to do to support our community. And so we are just trying to acknowledge that, look at ourselves with a straight face, put our head down and get back to work for the next day, because the best we can do is continue to be positioned. I think the other thing I would say to everybody is, like, one piece of advice that keeps being given out is communicate. So for those of you who are small businesses, talk to your banker, talk to your landlord, talk to your employees, right? Be transparent, tell everybody what's going on. That's the best advice. We keep telling everybody, if they have a retail space and they got a landlord, call your landlord. They know what's going on, but tell them where you're at. I would say the same thing for all of you in the nonprofit sector. The very first thing that I did was reach out to every one of my funders and say, hey, guess what? It's a new normal. The very first thing I did is say, any of you that already committed money to me, I want it now, because I need to know I've got cash going forward. So just like we do with our for-profits, our nonprofits need to think like businesses and act like businesses. And so continue to be looking at short, medium, and long-term range and planning that way, and continuing to do things like these webinars and watching where the market's going to go and changes are happening. There is a lot of advocacy. So every time you hear about some funder that has said, I'm not putting any more money out because I don't know what's happening, which seems like a dagger to the heart, I also see funders that are saying, what do you need? How can I help you? Here's where we're at. And so I think continuing to use our voices, continuing to advocate, continuing to try to focus in on some very clear agendas, like grants, not loans, for example, to me is the place that we all need to be going. So that's my pedestal.
Great. Rob, one very quick and direct question here is, can you apply for, if you apply for the PPP, can you then receive the EIDL loan? So this whole apply for everything does seem to be a confusion. Are they going to run into each other? And at which point, who do you go to decide what do you apply for?
Right. So answer is yes on that one. So the PPP and the EIDL cannot be used for the same purposes. So, but that advanced grant of that $10,000, that everyone's still waiting on. That those quick advance grants that everyone's waiting on are available. There is a way that you can actually, if you were to get the EIDL, you can actually, if for the very few people I'll say that actually got the EIDL money, you're able to actually put in the pay off that money through the PPP. That was one of the new restrictions that came through. But yes, you can apply for both. They cannot be used for the same purpose. So that's where the apply goes. And Jen, I am 100% with you on that one. When I meant the word apply, in my head, I didn't say it out loud, but it was grant. It is grant. I'm getting a thumbs up. All right. But yes, apply through with the SBA now. The EIDLs, those are not done through the banks. Those are done directly through the SBA, where the PPP is the one product that came down to the banking institutions, i.e. why some banks are able to move quicker, and some are really trying to iron this out to make sure that it is smooth and efficient come the day that we can actually say, yes, we are ready to get into business, take these applications, and then we can actually give a realistic turnaround time at the end of the day.
Great. Well, we're getting to the top of the hour, so I just wanted to give everybody a chance to give one last thought. Jen, I know you had given a last thought sort of before you closed off. So I'm going to go to Rob. Any last thoughts?
My last thoughts are just on a personal note. Everyone just be well, be healthy, be strong. We're continuing this fight together and with you. You have a community here to support you, whether it be this panel or everyone around you. Stay close to each other, love each other, and just we will get through this.
Great. Going to Shagun.
I was going to say after Jen, ditto, and then everything she said. The only closing thing, I'll echo what Rob said, that hoping all stay well and keep safe during this pandemic. As Jen said, this is all uncharted territory. None of us knows what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone the next hour, the way that this thing has been going. And so the only thing I'll say is, if you're not connected to one of the organizations represented here, encourage all of you to get connected. We exist in order to serve the folks that are on this call. And so, yes, communication from our organizations to folks that support us, but also you communicating with us, because that's how we can become nimble and also understand how we should be operating in the future. So thank you to Steve and Marini and Diego for hosting this webinar, and for all that attended.
Shagun, before you log off, I know I mentioned, and you mentioned, the webinar that you did with Ayanna Presley yesterday. It was a great summary of where the CARES Act stands today, and in larger terms. I know today we talked very specifically about some of the grant and loan funding, but she covered the act a little bit in larger terms. Where is that available, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so we just added a new page to our website. It's www.becma.org/onthemark. And you can find, we've already uploaded the video from that webinar. One of the things that her staff is working on is compiling all of the questions that were answered on the call and those that were not addressed, and doing a kind of a fact sheet for folks to review after the call, so they don't have to watch all 40 minutes of the conversation to get an answer. And I will note that next week, April 9th at 11, we're doing our second installment, and that's going to be with Bob Nelson and Nadine Boone, who are two of the leaders at the Massachusetts office of the SBA, to answer questions live, specifically about the CARES Act and other products from the SBA. We'll hope to have other announcements on who's going to be there in coming weeks.
Fantastic. Natalia.
Thank you. I think closing, I would say that I urge every single person to take this seriously. The mayor has been, trying to get the message across, and I know everyone here has access to different platforms. The sooner everybody really takes this seriously, I think the sooner we'll all be able to go back to whatever realm of normalcy we'll be at after this. It's really important that people practice social distancing. if you're going shopping and supporting our local businesses, that only one person is going into the store, you know, really being thoughtful around this stuff. It's really important. We're going to see, you know, clustering, and we'll start seeing kind of the remnants of not following these kind of guidelines in the next couple weeks. So I think Boston is really lucky in that we are not seeing crazy spikes, but it just does really require folks to take this seriously. And then I know that the mayor is the #1 fan of small businesses in the city of Boston, and will continue to empower us to do everything that we can to support small businesses across the city. I've put a bunch of links in this chat, and I hope, Diego, you and your team can share those out with everyone. Please feel free to email me, smallbiz@boston.gov, connect with your neighborhood business manager. Really reach out to us, because we are also looking for creative solutions to some of these problems. If you have an idea of how your business can get involved, please let me know. I mean, there are a lot of different departments doing a lot of different work, and we've probably, you know, thought about how to approach some of these things. But if you're a small business owner and want to get involved, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, because this is, you know, about every single Bostonian, and we are all impacted. We are all working really hard to help and make sure that people get the resources and the access that they need. So I just encourage people to continue that self-advocacy, reach out to us, connect folks that you know need access to some resources with us, and don't hesitate to reach out. I know everyone here on this panel is really supportive and will go outside of their personal capacity to help anyone. So thank you.
Natalia. Thanks. Steve, any last thoughts?
Only that everyone on this call is available literally 24/7 in one way or another to answer your questions. This is really confusing stuff. And it's easy to throw up your hands and say, God, I don't know what to do. If it's 8 weeks of payroll, and if I laid somebody off, do I have to bring them back? And what happens after 8 weeks? And there have been wonderful articles and FAQs. The Boston Globe had Sean Murphy had one yesterday. There are lots of information. We're available. If we don't have the answer, we will get you the answer, or we will send you to somebody who can get you the answer. But be strong, know that there are resources available, and know that we will be there, because this principle of equity and inclusion is an absolutely essential one. We have businesses owned by people from diverse backgrounds in the city who are going to feel naturally like, gee, I don't know if I can compete out there. We will create, as best we can, a level playing field. That's what the mayor's all about. That's what the city's about. That's what Jen's all about. That's what Berkshire and Shagun and ICIC are all about. So please consult with us, be in touch with us, and we will have more information for you almost on a daily basis. It's overwhelming. We understand all that. Take a deep breath. We will be there to help you.
Thanks. So lastly, I want to once again thank everybody on this panel who took the time to share whatever information we do have. I want to thank the partners who jumped on as attendees and have been feeding us information throughout, and all the business owners who are watching this live, all the business owners who told us that they'll be watching the recording over the weekend. And stay safe, stay well, and stay connected. Thank you all.
Thank you, Diego.
Thank you.